James, let's turn back, as we do so often here, to issues of health. And it has now been 2 years since the disaster at Fukushima. The 2-year anniversary of Fukushima, and the accident is not contained. This punchy, great piece from WashingtonsBlog.com you can also find at FukushimaUpdate.com. Nuclear expert Arnie Gunderson said that the containment vessel at Fukushima Reactor 2 has a large crack in it. Reactors 1, 2, and 3 are all exploded. The BBC reported that, quote, they know very little about what's going on inside reactors 1, 2, and 3, and they really don't know what the state of the reactor core is. Indeed, there's no containment at Fukushima. Large quantities of radiation are still leaking into the Pacific Ocean. The operator of the Fukushima plant says that it's impossible to keep storing radioactive water in the tanks, and that TEPCO will need to intentionally dump it into the ocean eventually. The area around Fukushima has become so contaminated that even the trees are radioactive, and Tokyo is almost as irradiated as Fukushima. The AFP notes that beach walkers are likely to encounter a disturbing but relentless flow of flotsam from Japan for years to come. And sidebar, I can speak to that here in Oregon on the Pacific coast. American sailors were exposed to massive doses of radiation. Conditions were so bad that they considered suicide. Many of these good men and women are now really sick. Both the Japanese and the American governments have abandoned them, however. TEPCO might not even meaningfully start work to decommission the plants until the radiation level drops, which would be decades from now, or when the technology miraculously appears to clean it up. It's now been officially admitted that the accident was caused by the collusion between government and nuclear industry. Even a worker at Fukushima nuclear plant succinctly notes, even an elementary school kid knows that TEPCO always lies. We have been fooled by the government. We don't mean to pick on Japan. After all, the American government is even dictating some nuclear policy in Japan. American reactors are even more dangerous than Fukushima. And a secret report confirms that Southern California Edison, Con Ed, knew of major problems at the San Onofre nuclear plant, but went ahead and let the slipshot expansion and remodeling project continue anyway. James, we also have another link to, again, your own FukushimaUpdate.com about some of the protests on the radioactive second anniversary of Fukushima. James.
Absolutely. Again, this is a great short piece by Washington's blog. It's well researched and well linked, as all his work is. So I hope people will get that article and send it out. I know a lot of people have retweeted it from Fukushima Update, so I'm glad to see that. It is important to keep this in mind, and it is important to realize that the problem certainly has not been solved. It is not contained. It is not going away anytime soon. They're estimating 30 to 40 years for the cleanup alone, and that, of course, doesn't mean that that would get rid of what's actually happening in the reactors themselves. That will be going on for tens of thousands of years. So this is an ongoing nightmare, and it still is a problem. And unfortunately, whatever impotence or motion there was in the Japanese public towards actually changing off of nuclear power seems to be dwindling. There were some impressive protests there in Tokyo just leading up to the 3/11 anniversary. But they seem to have been a more of a one-time thing than the weekly thing that we were seeing last year with the hundreds of thousands marching out onto the streets. And now that we have the new Abe prime ministership here, it looks like it's just going to be stay the course with nuclear. And the plan, at any rate, is to start switching the nuclear reactors back on here. So this is still a battle, and it is important to remember that the official reports themselves note that this is not a natural disaster. This was a man-made disaster that was brought about through collusion between the government regulators and the TEPCO that was just a complete and total joke. And it would be funny if it wasn't so incredibly tragic. So I think we have to keep that in mind, and keep in mind that it was this government nuclear industry nexus that caused this problem, and that's the exact same nexus that exists in every single country that has a nuclear power industry, because that's exactly how nuclear power thrives, and that's exactly why we as a civilization, as a species, can't afford to keep doing this. We have to start looking for alternatives, and I have discussed that on the podcast before, so I hope people will check that out. and get behind the movement to try to get rid of this power from whatever country you might be in that has it.
James, and it's funny, even when you sort of put it that way, it reminds me that it is man-made, because even in the way that we refer to it, we don't refer to it as, oh yeah, it's been the second anniversary since the massive earthquake. We refer to it as Fukushima. That's the man-made disastrous part of it. So I think even in our language and the way we talk about it is kind of telling about what really went down.